Yes, welcome everyone. I'm a postdoc researcher at the Copernicus Institute, as was already told, and in this paper presentation I would like to tell you more about our study, which took place in a very innovative context, I would say, together with three universities, the three Dutch universities. My colleagues and we developed an interdisciplinary online inter-university course, which was a first-year bachelor course on sustainable cities. And our overall research question was, how do students experience such an online interdisciplinary and inter-university course? And to show you a bit how our research was organized, I have here a short visualization where you can see on the top the course. Within the course, we looked at student perceptions on various aspects. So the first research question focused on transactional distance and presence, which both are related to online collaboration and online interaction. Because in our course, students were grouped in teams, and then within the interdisciplinary teams, they had to think about sustainable solutions regarding sustainable cities. So we were really interested in how to design a course that will be of low transactional distance and high presence. To shortly explain the two aspects, so transactional distance is about the non-physical distance students can perceive in a course. So non-physical would be emotional distance with each other or the teacher, or cognitive distance, social distance, these kinds of distances. And this is really important to consider when developing an online course between different disciplines and universities, because students will feel connected to each other and close to each other in order to collaborate sufficiently online. And to study transactional distance, we used a standardized online questionnaire in which student-teacher, student-student, and student content transactional distance was studied. And the same goes for presence. Presence is also very important, especially in an online context where students are not physically able to collaborate with each other. So they, with our course design, we want to ensure that students feel present with each other in order to collaborate sufficiently. And again, a standardized questionnaire was used to study social and cognitive and teaching presence, which together are better known as the community of inquiry framework. Then we also focused on the interdisciplinary skills students would develop in our course, which was the second research question. And the third research question was about the general strengths and weaknesses students perceived within the course. So here again, you see the three research questions. So first, we focus on the perceptions of transactional distance and presence, then the interdisciplinary skills, and at last, the strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so the study took place in a 10 weeks online course called Inter-University Sustainability Challenges, where a total of 23 students from 3 Dutch universities participated. And as already told, the 23 students were then grouped into students of about 4 to 5 people, all from the different universities. So we have the interdisciplinarity, and each team focused on one of the 3 subtopics within the team. So either they would focus on energy transition within Amsterdam, air quality, or urban agriculture. And within the team, they would then develop sustainable solutions to accomplish air quality in Amsterdam or energy transition. So the pedagogical approach we used in our course design was challenge-based learning. And there's no official procedure for using challenge-based learning approach, but there is a framework which visualizes the 3 main phases which students go through when doing a challenge-based learning activity or a course, in our case. So starting with the engage phase, where students form teams, they think about interdisciplinary research questions, getting more knowledge about the challenge itself, then the second phase where students start investigating together in their teams, they collect data, they bring in the different disciplines. And then in the last phase, students act on that data they found, they apply their knowledge and integrate the different disciplines. And in the case of our course, students were asked to develop an online artifact within Tigron or Minecraft, where they then visualized their disciplinary solutions. So all in all, challenge-based learning is really driven by real-life challenges, which are complex and open-ended. And the student teams themselves decide how to approach these complex challenges. And together with the teacher, they are in a kind of co-learning process with the interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary learning aspects. For the course itself, we made use of the virtual classroom at Utrecht University, which is a physical room at the university where the teacher can stand and then teach. And the students will join online, and the teacher can see, so you see here the different screens and the different students. So the students see the teacher as if he or she is standing in a classroom, and the teacher can interact with the students online. And students can raise their hands, they can answer to quizzes, polls, they can use the whiteboard, breakout rooms, and they can also switch from different camera views. So here we have the behind view, where they can see each other, but there's also a front view and a slide view. So the students can really decide what they want to see in that classroom. And we were really interested on the effects of the virtual classroom on transactional distance and presence, because we thought that since students are working together within the challenge-based learning approach, so within the interdisciplinary teams, together with the interactive virtual classroom lessons, we expected that the transactional distance should be low, so that students would feel close to each other and the presence would be high with the teacher. Here again, our expectations for the first research questions. So we expected low transactional distance, high presence, and of course a significant difference between the pre and post-test measurements which we conducted. So the pre-post measurements were mainly for the questionnaires, which we had, the two which I mentioned at the beginning. From the 23 students, 16 students answered these questions. And we also had observations of the lessons in the virtual classroom. We qualitatively analyzed reflection papers of the students, and we held interviews with some of the students. Not all of them wanted to participate, but those who wanted, we were glad to interview. And looking at the transactional distance questionnaire data, we can see here the overall main score. And maybe before I tell you more about the scores, it's important to remember that a high score on this questionnaire resembles low transactional distance, which is desirable. So we want low distance between the students. And here you can see the main score, which was from 12 to 60. So 12 was the minimum score and 60 would be the maximum. And then the pre and post results. So we see a mean score of 47.85 and 46.85, which is quite high. We see that 60 was the max. So the overall main score was pretty high on the transactional distance, which means that they had perceived a low distance. And then if we look at the three subscales of this questionnaire, so the student-student distance, student-teacher, and student content, we see the same. So here we have, of course, a different range of scores because there are less items on there. But all in all, these scores are pretty high. What we also see is that the scores between the pre and the post test decreased. So from 21 to 19, from 15 to, here the difference is less high, but in general the scores decreased, which meant that the transactional distance increased during the runtime of the course. We found one significant difference in the scale, which was on the student-student transactional distance. All the other differences are not significant. And when we have a look at the student-student transactional distance scale, then we can see here the items that were used to measure the student scale and the pre and the post test numbers, and on the scale from 1 to 5 again. And what we see here is the significant increase in transactional distance again on the different scales. So that was unexpected. And here we have the results on the presence scale, where we also have high perceptions found. So again, the overall score. In this case, a high score means a high presence, which is what we want. So here again, you see the ranges from 34 to 170, and for the subscales. All in all, high results on the presence, so high presence in general. And the 3 subscales are ranked based on their highness. So cognitive presence was then the highest, perception, then teaching, and then social. In general, we see high scores, but again, decreasing trends. The differences are not significant, unfortunately, so we cannot say anything from that, but that's what we found in general terms when analyzing the data. So were our expectations met that we had at the beginning? Partly yes, so we indeed saw low perceptions of transactional distance, but in the runtime of the course they increased with only one significant difference. It's important to mention. The perception of presence also was high, but no significant differences between the pre and the post, which is also why our third expectations is only partly true. And the difference was also unexpected. So we had expected an decrease in distance, so that students would feel more close to each other in the runtime of the course, but the opposite happened, so they felt more distance. Then we had the second and the third research question, where we were interested in the interdisciplinary skills students would develop and the strengths and weaknesses. So for this qualitative analysis, we are still actually now busy with the coding process of these data. And we are doing this with 2 coders who code independently of each other. And then after each paper, we discuss our codes until we have agreement. So we do this for all the 15 papers we have. And if no agreement can be found, then the third coder will be asked to solve the disagreement. Until now, everything could be solved, so that is fine. To study which interdisciplinary skills students perceive to have developed, we used the 8 dimensions of interdisciplinarity as mentioned in the paper of Latuka et al. We did not give the students this list when writing the reflection papers, so we analyzed the papers and looked for these dimensions, whether we could find them. And from the 8 papers that we already coded, from the 15, we found 21 skills mentioned of these. So we have it starts with the awareness of disciplinarity, the appreciation, the recognition of limitations, the evaluation, finding common ground, and in the end, the highest dimension would then be the integrative skill. So where students integrate the different disciplines of their groups. And examples of interdisciplinary skills are mentioned here. These are only 2 to give a short impression. For example, for the first dimension, awareness of disciplinarity, where a student describes that different methods were used within the different disciplines and that he or she was not aware that the system approach can be used in different ways. Second example of a skill was the ability to find common ground, where students within their team got some tension between the disciplines, but they were managed to resolve it and find a common ground and play by their strength related to their discipline. When coding the strengths and weaknesses students perceived, we used a different approach. There we looked at the type of strength and weakness the students mentioned, the level at which it occurred. So was it an individual student perception, or did it occur on the student team, or was it more related to the course design? And third, we looked at the relation. So was this weakness related to challenge-based learning in general, to online learning, to the course design that we used, or inter-university collaboration? So these were the three main coding aspects that were used. And to give you an example of the perceived strengths, you can see here a text and the codes that we applied. So the student here describes that that he or she used, that you got more insight and improved analytical writing skills. And we coded this as new interdisciplinary knowledge on the student level related to challenge-based learning, interdisciplinary learning. And another example where students describe that this course helped them to look more critically at things, and that the roles were divided equally. We also have some examples of the weaknesses that were found. These were, for example, when collaborating in an interdisciplinary group, then you have different jargons, so it was difficult sometimes for students to understand each other, to communicate on the same level. This was coded on a student level team and related to interdisciplinary learning. And another weakness was working online with students which you don't know, from different universities, different backgrounds. That can be a weakness of a course design if it's not supporting students in this aspect. At the end, we also had interviews with the students to see what their perceptions were of the virtual classroom, and these were all very positive. So we were really happy with this result. Students described it as, for example, that they could see the entire teacher standing, which was different than to Microsoft Teams, where you see, like me, for example, now I'm sitting behind my laptop, but there they could see the teacher standing and pointing to things. So that was very positive for the students. They also felt that the lectures were more active compared to, for example, previous lectures they had in Microsoft Teams. They describe it as being closest to real-life classroom, more engaging and interactive. They could concentrate better. They felt that the teacher was enjoying more teaching online, and the teacher was reading less from the PowerPoint presentation. And they were also able to see their students better, because in Teams you only have these small pictures, and there in the classroom view they could see the screens on the bigger picture. So in conclusion, we can say that students on average had positive perceptions of transactional distance and presence. There was a low distance and high presence, but the results were still a bit unexpected, because we did not expect an increase in the transactional distance, especially with the student-student part, where we found the significant difference. Then related to the second research question, which interdisciplinary skills did students perceive to have developed? We found a total of 21 skills until now. And the three main skills they mentioned were awareness of disciplinarity, appreciation of disciplinarity perspectives, and integrative skill, which I think is very nice in a challenge-based context where they collaborate with all the different students. And the last question, which strengths and weaknesses, we can conclude we found a total of 67 strengths and 82 weaknesses. So it seems that students perceived more weaknesses in this course. And when we look at the type of strength and weaknesses, we see that the strengths are really related to the open process of challenge-based learning, that students are student-driven, the teams can decide themselves which way they want to go, the collaboration skills they acquire through that process, and the new interdisciplinary knowledge they gain, whereas the weaknesses are more related to the course design. So things that we as teachers could improve quite easily, I guess, related to the workload and the student team constellations, the schedules, the clarity of the assignments. So it's interesting to see that the weaknesses are not related to interdisciplinary learning or challenge-based learning or the online aspect, but more of the more administrative course design choices that we made. Yes, to conclude, we could have discussed some questions about interdisciplinary learning and presence, but for now I want to thank you for listening to this presentation.
Thank you so much, Julia. I wanted to follow up on this aspect that has to do with the type of weaknesses that you found that have to do with course design, right? How was the process for the faculty members to coordinate the efforts? Because, you know, it's very complex, you know.
Yes.
And we know that there's a huge success in terms of the actual focus of the field, right? So it's a matter of, as what you said, it's like, okay, just craft it a little bit in certain aspects and run it again, right? And for sure it's going to improve. So what was the process for coordinating faculty, teaching philosophies, teaching styles, delivery modes, etc.?
Yes. It felt sometimes as if for the teachers it was also a kind of challenge-based approach, because it was very difficult to see. I mean, it's interesting to then learn about the different perspectives and philosophies between the three universities, because the Netherlands is not a very big country and the three universities are quite close to each other looking at the distance, but still there are different ways of teaching and different schedules, different ways of supporting students. So the teaching styles differed really much, but also the schedules. So it took a lot of communication and planning and everything to manage that on the teacher side. And the teachers complemented each other very well based on their backgrounds. So they could then use all their background knowledge and combine it, which was very, very nice, I think. But for the students, that also meant that they had to get used to the different styles, and we managed to find one teaching style by focusing on challenge-based learning. But the students themselves within their teams also had to manage when collaborating with students from other universities. So they had to find time to collaborate outside of the course. And this is something we couldn't help them very much with, because they had to communicate that themselves. So yeah, but all in all, it's a really challenging task with, you need a clear project leader who really then makes the decisions in the end. But it's a difficult task, and we will run the same course again next year. And with the improvements, we take all the feedback from the students, and then we will see how that will go. And we will also have a bit more students that time. So yeah, I'm curious to see how this will work out.
Definitely, it's going to be super interesting to see. I wanted to ask you about the community of inquiry and how you guys were able to put faculty on the same page in terms of the implementation of it in a balanced way, right? Like different presence.
So the community of inquiry, we only focused on the student level.
Oh, okay.
So it was that we wanted to achieve that students, I mean, it would be interesting to also study the teacher perspective, because now we only focus on student perspectives, but at the same time you saw that the same study could be replicated from the teacher perspective and see how they went, how it all went. We didn't do that. We had some interviews with teachers, but that's another study to focus more on the collaboration process, but they didn't fill in, for example, the questionnaires. But it's the same procedure, because we also had only online meetings. It was not feasible to travel to the different universities for each meeting. So we had the same process as the students, forming a team, getting to know each other, but also the jargon and finding a common goal. So in that aspect, we had the same learning curve as the students, and we could see how much time it takes, and especially online. Some things are more easier, for example, meeting or sharing documents, but others take more time when you want to communicate and on a more personal level and find that connection. So
Yeah.
it would be interesting to study that also, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'll be on the look to see how it goes, right?
Yeah.
It looks really, really interesting and really meaningful to the profession, right? To expand what we offer in a meaningful way, not only educationally speaking for us, as teachers, but also for our students,
Yes.
and for the learning experience that they are able to build through these experiences that are not, common, traditional, So.
Yes, indeed.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Julia. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to see the future
Yes.
implementation of this process again and the results, right?
Yes, thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.